as we're in adoration, we have all the science that we know of the co-regulation, and then obviously our faith, hope, and love is activated. And so it's not activated for us to just kind of stay still within ourselves, but to also to bring that to others. So we go and we bring, we receive Jesus at Mass, and then we go and we bring his presence to others.
Welcome to Raising Grace Made for Wholeness. And this is amazing that we're actually able to bring all of us together here.
Yes, lovely.
And I know, and I'm so excited because the past 3 episodes, if you've been following along, as we're walking through the timeline that it seems like years ago that we unpacked what we were understanding, but just this understanding of what it means to raise young people in grace, and that we're made for wholeness. We're body, soul, together, body, soul, divinity, which we'll talk about a little bit. We're talking about Jesus in a little bit, yes. But in this episode, what I want to do is really just bring together what we've been talking about, because I said that this is the foundation that we're trying to lay so that we understand the neuroscience, we understand, social emotional learning, we understand the virtuous life. Really, we understand all that it means for us to become fully the person God's created us to be, to become saints, to dwell in the household of God. And in Dr. Villa in our studies and the studies that we've done, we talked about this being a needed study. We recognized that we wanted to come up with something that people could hold on to. We need practical things. We're body, soul, right? We're not all spirit, and this understanding of something we've come to call the still point of grace, So I thought maybe you could kind of start us out and provide a kind of working definition that we're going to unpack for you in this episode.
Well, that really came from our needed study where we were looking at how dysregulated and fragmented our young people are these days. And we show some statistics in our book about how there's been up to like a 400-fold increase in things like depression and anxiety. There's just a lot of fragmentation. And we think that's because we've lost this holding environment, to be sure. But it's also because this informational complexity has led to all this overstimulation. And you think about anxiety as kind of worry about the future, depression is sadness about the past. But what grounds children in the here and now with their caregivers? And we came across this Carthusian model that says the cross of Christ is still in the turning world. Well, we all know we are in an incredibly turning world right now. There's just so much coming at our young people. And it really is this idea of learning to become still and regulated, so they can be open to their learning and open to their growth and to Christ.
And as we'll describe, we're talking about this, that, in order for the children to understand what the still point is, we as the adults need to know what our still point is. And for Mother Veritas and Stuart Thomas Aquinas and myself, when we study in our religious life, we study the spiritual life, and there's so many, and you do too in your thing. I'm not, it's just a part of our day to day,
I know, you're so blessed, and we're so blessed to be in Southeast Michigan with you all.
Oh, well, thank you, but we talk about this as like living in the presence of God, you know, and I will ask you, so you can think about it as we're talking, kind of like what would your still point be? We'll talk about that at the end of the show here. But in the last episode, Mother, we talked about the grace of baptism and then being infused with the theological virtues. And maybe you could give a short kind of summary, because this may be a new audience here, of why this understanding of living the theological virtues is important and living in the life of grace.
Well, we talked about just that, how baptism as the initial sacrament that we receive is that it infuses us with the divine life, that we receive the theological virtues of faith, hope, and love, and that even allows us to live the supernatural life. So it's this just beginning point.
Yes, and so living the supernatural life, it's we're feeling, we're living in God's presence.
Yes.
Is that the relational part, you
Yes.
know, and the seeing. And I think you talked about this in yours about.
Yes. Yeah, so we were talking about the kerygma, right? This proclamation and the message of, you know, how God had created us in this grace state, and then when original sin was introduced and this chaos came about, throughout that whole time in the garden where Adam and Eve had sinned and they were hiding from God, and ultimately what he was seeking was to see them. You know, he said, "Where are you?" Because the life of grace, or the life of virtue, the Christian life that we're called to as disciples, is a life of enjoying and being loved and being in the gaze of the Father perpetually.
Right.
And that life is what we're called to now. And that's the beauty of our Christian life. And it's not possible without God, right? We emphasize that when we were discussing, we talked about John chapter 15, without me, you can do nothing.
Right.
And so it's not only resting in the gaze of the Father, but that gaze is actually empowering. It's restorative.
Yes.
It's re-engaging us. It's reintegrating us. And we're not necessarily doing anything.
Right.
Right?
Right.
But that's the environment and the surround that we want to raise children up in. And that's an incredible gift from Catholic education, that you can create that still point where children can encounter God in their everyday life.
And then, Dr. Villa, when you talked about the first 1,000 days, you were talking about the gaze of the mother or the caregiver or the parent, you know, on the child, and neurologically, what's happening?
They need to be in relationship, and they need to see faces, and they need to know that they're seen, and seen by the Father, seen by their parents, seen by the teachers who are around them. And this translates to an incredible sense of safety for them, that kind of attunement and that kind of seeing them. So we know now, because of the decade of the brain, that this is so foundational to brain growth. And I think it's how it's going to transform education right now. It's the thing that's needed.
Exactly. Education and even just raising children, you know, that the understanding of the neuroplasticity, that the brain is rewiring itself, and how important
gradually over time, and it's wiring itself in the context of those gazes, and living under that grace. And what parent wouldn't want that for their child's education?
And so this understanding, this safe, seen, soothed, and secure, that we as adults, or as we grow, we know how important that is. That we first need to experience that with God, to understand what God's love is. And there's this understanding of co-regulation that I've discovered. I mean, a lot of this I'm learning. As we've said, Dr. Villa and I are kind of teaching each other. I'm reading all about the neuroscience, and she's learning about theology. This has been a great little course that we've had all together here, right?
I've just been all ears. It's wonderful.
But with this understanding of co-regulation, I think that we actually had done a video on this together to explain this. And what we'd like to do is have you view that now, and then we'll come back and unpack that a little bit more for you. We're here at our Mother House Chapel in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and we'd like to share with you a concept from Raised in Grace, Made for Wholeness. It comes from neuroscience, really a biological fact that we know, which is called co-regulation. And I'd like for Dr. Villa to kind of unpack that for us so that we can truly understand what this means.
Yeah, so neuroplasticity is how the body and brain get wired through our experiences over time. And, we mostly talk about the brain getting wired, but the nervous system can also get wired through this process of co-regulation. And children are always looking to the adults in their life to regulate their own nervous systems. And this is how they come to self-regulate eventually, is through co-regulation. So co-regulation is when an adult in a safe and connected state helps to bring a child into that same safe and connected state.
So when we're teaching or if we're parenting or coaching,
Right.
they're constantly looking, and this also, the same understanding can even come between us as adults, but
Right.
here our focus is really looking at the interaction with children. Are there certain, we talked about it being a biological fact from the neuroscience, but are there ingredients or part of this that kind of make up this whole understanding?
Yeah, so scientists have broken down co-regulation into 3 components, and those are neuroception, resonance, and mirroring. And so neuroception is the way that our bodies are picking up these cues of safety, danger, relatedness. And we do it within our bodies. We do it by picking up cues from our environment and in our interactions with other people. And so this is the idea of what you see when a baby will coo when they're with their parent, for instance, but they'll cry when they're with a stranger. So even at that very young age, they're picking up cues in their nervous systems about their environment and the nervous system state of other people. And then the second principle, and the second ingredient, is resonance. And this is like vibrational energy. Like we can pick up the energy and emotional state of another person. And one example from physics that really illustrates this that I think is important is when you put 2 string instruments like harps in a room and you pluck the string on one harp, it will resonate and literally vibrate the string on the other harp.
The exact same one.
The exact same
That's
string.
pretty incredible. Exactly.
And our nervous systems are like this when we're with people. So say you're married to somebody for a long period of time, or you have a good friend, you learn over time to really tune in to the energy and emotion of that person pretty quickly. And it is kind of a shortcut in our learning and our being together.
So we're not imagining it when we're in a space and we can kind of pick up the tension or the vibes from other people.
Right, or the joy.
The joy,
you know,
exactly.
These
right.
things are contagious.
Yes.
And when we say children are absorbing so much from the world around them, this is the mechanism by which that's happening. And then the last ingredient is called mirroring. So this comes from mirror neurons, if anybody's heard of those. And they're neurons in our central nervous system that help us imitate another person. And it's one of the ways that we learn again. It's one of the ways that we practice empathy is through this process called mirroring. It's a really important discovery, I would say, in the last 20 years in neuroscience.
So what's an example of that you could kind of maybe help them understand that? Yeah.
Well, I saw a really interesting, adorable one on the internet a few days ago. It was about a 1-year-old little boy sitting on the floor, and he was really distressed and crying. And you hear his mother in the background say to him, "If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands." And you could just see him let go of his distress, and he started imitating her clapping, but he was also imitating the joy in her voice and in her person.
So that's what I love about these examples is that you can, like the importance of bringing the joy and the delight that actually they're going to see that and imitate
Yes,
that.
absolutely. And that's going to get wired into their nervous system.
So this whole understanding with the co-regulation shows this relationship, that we are relational and that our brain is this social organ,
Right.
and it's always constantly, in the nervous system, constantly looking for the relationship, this connection. And the reason why we picked this location here in our beautiful Mother House Chapel.
Oh, I'm so honored to be here. It's beautiful.
Is that this understanding of co-regulation, we can think of this in our own prayer time, our own time when we have Eucharistic adoration with Jesus, this experience, this biological experience of co-regulation happens with us. So when I come in here, the sisters, we come in here early in the morning for our time of meditation and adoration. There's this whole sense of silence and calmness that just kind of descends among everyone because we're in the presence of Jesus, body, blood, soul, and divinity. And so from him, this same biological interaction can truly take place in ourselves, and it really brings to life that gospel where he says, come to me, all you who are labor and are heavy burdened, or even in our own times, all of us who are experiencing, stress or trauma or just the pressures of our daily life, that coming and resting in him, that yes, we do feel this, but it is because something truly biological is happening.
And you're so right that when you spend time as a community finding that still point of grace, co-regulating with him, and then you carry that out into the world, that's an incredible gift. Yeah. And this is what we do as parents, what we do as teachers, and what we're encouraging people to do is to find that still point of grace through co-regulating with Christ so that they can carry that into their work with children in the beauty of this gradualness, growing them up so they can be calm and connected and whole.
That was amazing. Thank you. It's interesting to see all of those different parts of co-regulation. The resonance, the mirroring, the neuroception.
Mm-hmm.
It's fascinating.
It kind of changes the way you think about the environment, especially as you approach relating to children.
Yes.
It's so much more dynamic and
yes, that
even
things
with
are
each
happening.
other.
Even
Exactly.
in
unspoken
silence.
level,
Yes.
right?
Right.
There's so much that's being passed between people and in a silent and almost imperceptible way.
It's so true. It's exactly
very powerful.
that.
Thank you.
Yes, it's so good for us to know that this is how children absorb their world, is through the nervous system states of people around them. And when we give them that gift of being able to absorb grace and an encounter with Christ, that it just nurtures everything that teachers and parents are doing.
So when we're in this time, this era, of the Eucharistic revival, and understanding what we mean by the co-regulation, we talked, as you just saw, the co-regulation with Jesus is the same co-regulation that's taking place, even as the four of us are sitting here. So all of a sudden I went kind of crazy on them. You'd be able to see their reaction. They'd be like, oh, what happened to her? And that's the same thing, that can happen, like you were saying, the importance of with the children in the classroom or even at home. Or, I can remember at school after Mass, I would talk to the parents sometimes, and I would just be talking about patience or whatever, and some of the parents would stop me and they would say, Sister, were you in the car with me on the way to school? How did you know that I was out of control? I was like, I didn't, But with this, the co-regulation with Jesus is so often, when we spend time in Eucharistic adoration,
that's right.
When we have that quiet time with him, we walk away and we know something is different, and this understanding really gives us a term, really, to and a definition of. And hopefully it can be a transformative way. And I just have to share one example, and then I'm going to have you all share about your still point of grace. So be thinking about that as I'm sharing this. But with the children, this is so important as the teachers or even, as parents, if you could feel, you're coming home from work and you're going to come home upset, stop at the church, make a visit, put it in the tabernacle of Jesus, and allow him to come in and to calm you as you're coming, because what you bring home is going to have that impact. Well, this teacher I'd share this understanding of co-regulation with the teacher, and she had one student in her classroom was just like out of control, and we know about that, and different situations. You're a parent, so you know what that means. So on the way to recess, she took him by the chapel, and they went in and they made a little visit, and they're praying. And as they're walking out, he looked up at her and he said, "Boy, I sure needed that." So not only did his nervous system Jesus got to be the first one to reset his nervous system and to help him. Then he was able to go outside and play and get all that energy out. But that's the same thing, we all need. And so I'm going to put you guys on the spot. We talk about this understanding of the still point, but, what is it that you kind of do personally to kind of help you get to that point so that we can really bring the love of God to other people and our own selves? So I don't know who wants to go first.
I could go first. I can go. I think one of the things, I have two things that came to mind. One of the things that's so beautiful about our life in a particular way is everywhere we are, no matter where we live, at the Mother House in Michigan or at our convents all over, we have a Eucharistic chapel, and so our world turns around that place. That's the central place of our home. And when we come in, from school, we stop there first and then go on and, say hello to our Lord. And those actual little drop-in visits are little points of connection, I think, in that. I also really enjoy time outside. I think that's something that I think we can all relate to that, being in nature and being in God's creation and seeing his beauty is really essential for my own life. But again, going back to the chapel, it's just a privilege in our life that we have that. No matter where we are, our world does really literally turn around our chapel.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Wonderful.
Is she still yours?
Well, she did steal my. I can build on it. So
That's why I went first.
I think we would all say that same thing too. I think we'd all say that same thing. Primarily, it's the chapel, but as she was speaking too, I was thinking. For me too, it's I have an office in the Mother House that has beautiful windows that overlook the front of our house, and I'm in my office a lot doing a lot of work, and I think a beautiful part of a still point of grace for me actually is being able to be in my office, and as I'm working, I know that our Lord is present, and so sometimes I might be a little bit, we have our moments of dysregulation where it's like you're surprised by something or something didn't go according to plan. But I can kind of go back to this space of like, our Lord is here with me and I know he's present. And it's just a really beautiful kind of melding of my role in community as well as what he's asking me to do in this present moment.
Yeah, I love that because it's really beautiful because you're thinking, oh, he is in the house.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. You think about when you're growing up, or whatever, and you're at home alone, and you're when your parents are there and when they're not there, right?
Yes.
And so if they're there, there's a sense of calm. When they're not, there's a little sense of like you could be scared or not feeling safe. Chaos. So I can imagine, Mother, in your role, when you're having those situations, like, okay, Jesus is here, he's with me, and I will get through this. So that's going to get you through that still point. That's really beautiful. Yeah, that's good.
Well, I grew up with a lot of freedom to just explore the outdoors. I was recently watching somebody from my generation who said, "You don't understand. We were kicked out in the morning, and then the whistle went off at night, and you would come back." But a lot of freedom to explore the fields and the rivers and the hills. And I really find that kind of peace and stillness when we're out hiking. And one of the things we did with our kids to get them to lay down their phones was to take them on these extended hikes. And we walked the old Roman road in Italy, and we walked the Camino. And just to see them be quiet and still and come into relationship with each other while we explored beautiful architecture in Europe. It was, I think that's one of the best things we did with our kids.
Wow.
And it's so wonderful too that we have memory. I mean, sometimes memories are a source of suffering, but there are also things that can also calm us, so we can hold a moment, for ourselves. And I guess I'm on the spot now.
Yes, I was going to say you're not off the hook.
I almost got out of this, So, it changes, I think there's different times. There's a moment that'll kind of sustain you for a year or two. But I think for myself, a lot of the work that I do for the community and the wonderful blessing that I have, by the way, thank you, that I'm able to do with Openlight Media is that I am at the computer and I'm working, and sometimes I would love to have that more time outdoors or at the chapel. But I have this beautiful image when I made a private retreat at this wonderful place, Caxton Mountains, the Sisters of Bethlehem. You have your own little hermitage, and 8 days of silence, which was just, wow. For someone like me, it was just wonderful. I got to where I'd walk in and the icon would be there, and I'd be like, "Hi, Mary." It's like, who am I going to greet today? Yes. But they had a Eucharistic chapel where you could just spend time in adoration. So I have a photograph of that, and I just keep that at my computer.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes.
I'm looking down at that and just trying to do what I can to just recall that, that God is present in that
Yes.
moment.
Mm-hmm.
So there can be disruptive things that can happen, and to kind of keep me calm and focused on, doing what the Lord's work is. So
Yes.
I remember my son's Boy Scout mentor, this holy man of God who just ministered to the children in our little community. The only advice he gave to my son was to spend 1 hour a week in adoration.
Wow.
And he said, if you do that, everything in your life is going to flow out of that and be so much better.
that's beautiful.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that, that same thing, you think about, and why is that? It's the co-regulation, is understanding, the importance of regulation.
Coming into a point of stillness,
grace, right? And I think, Mother, and you brought up, when we were talking about the sacraments, you brought up the importance of Mass, and that at that moment when we're dismissed and we go forth, right?
Yes.
I don't know if you want to bring
Yes.
that up again here. It'd be awesome.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, as we're in adoration, we have all the science that we know of the co-regulation, and then obviously our faith, hope, and love is activated. And so it's not activated for us to just kind of stay still within ourselves, but to also to bring that to others. So
true.
we go and we bring, we receive Jesus at Mass, and then we go and we bring his presence to others. And that's,
co-regulate.
And co-regulate, yes, and spread. Yes.
I think you've sisters said that, how do they recognize that you've been with Jesus?
Yes.
Right, exactly. And
process.
that's, I love that, that you brought that up. That's like that line, in Acts where, when they were looking at the apostles, and he says, can you tell that you've been with Jesus? I know you said that about us, but it's anybody,
Yes.
And that's the one thing that we want, anyone, we want to be that witness, or you as teachers or as administrators or as parents, can people look at us? It's a question, the way I examine myself.
Yes.
Can they tell that I have been with Jesus?
Yes.
It's a really wonderful way to give that examine, and that other people can witness to that. So thank you all so much for your time. Hopefully that you all can go and think about what your still point of grace may be. That time when you can just feel, God's love for you, that you can go and bring that out to others, and be that, that really, as St. Francis said, I can't believe us Dominicans were getting into it, to be that instrument of peace,
Excellent.
and in the world, and the turning world that we are all experiencing.